You're listening to the Voice of Florida Architecture, the podcast of AIA Florida. Welcome to the next installment in our Legacy series. I'm your host, Rhonda Hammond, AIA. Today's conversation is particularly special one because we're celebrating one of our own. Joyce Owens, FAIA, has been part of the leadership story of AIA for years, and we've known her as a colleague, a leader, and someone who has given a tremendous amount to the profession. We're incredibly proud to celebrate her latest milestone, her election as president-elect of the American Institute of Architects. In 2028, Joyce will serve as the president of AIA National. And for those of us here in Florida, there's an added sense of pride in seeing one of our own reach this level of national leadership. So Joyce, welcome, and it's great to have you back.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you so much. It's always good to be within the Florida family. You know very well how much Florida has shaped who I am, my leadership. And so coming here to have my first inaugural kind of conversation, it just feels right. So thank you for having me.
So first of all, congratulations again. This is a huge moment. So tell us, when you realized that you had been elected president-elect, what was the first thing that went through your mind? What was that like?
Well, my first thought was not about the title, but it was all about the responsibility. And that thought was terrifying. It was a moment to take a breath and just say, oh my, because Ilya called me and told me. And I'm sure it took me a few minutes, it was probably like 5 seconds, but it felt forever before I actually responded to his, to the news. So, and then I thought about it a little bit more, and I just, in that moment, and I thought, wow, this is what Mickey Jacobs did. The last president Florida had was Mickey Jacobs in 2013, and those footsteps were huge footsteps to follow. And it was just such a huge opportunity that I never dreamed I would have. And so it's very special. And, it did kind of come home in a short time when I started making phone calls, and telling people that I won. And yeah, it was just great. The response was great. So that was nice.
It was so fun. We have a group text with Lourdes and Elizabeth and Becky and a couple other people in Miami. We call it the Miami Five. And it was really late at night, and we get a text on that says, Joyce is a winner. And we go, yeah, we think so too. And it took us a while to realize that it was the announcement that you had won. So we were all excited about it.
Oh, that's
It
so
was special.
sweet. That's so
Mhm.
nice. I don't think I want to put it out in public, but I did run upstairs and whisper in Becky's ear. And I told her very carefully she was not allowed to say anything to anyone. I said, no reaction, Becky. And yeah, but I had to tell her. And then they announced it shortly afterwards at the fellows' dinner. And so that's when somebody ran up and said, Becky, you can go ahead. You can tell it. So
There
that
we
was
go.
nice. Yeah.
We were all anxiously waiting to hear the news, and of course cheering you on.
Thank you.
So
Yes.
you've had a long leadership journey within AIA. What initially drew you into AIA leadership?
I think what drew me into AIA is, I had joined the AIA right out of college, and I had lived in Denver for a couple years, and then I had gone to England for a year and then I'd moved to Florida. And so during those years that I was trying to get my license and my internship, I had joined the AIA just kind of as a young person, and I wanted to do that because I felt I met a lot of people that I felt I wouldn't meet, like-minded people that I wouldn't meet. And so when I came back from England, and when 15 years later, I did actually move to England then. 15 years later, I came back, and it was immediately I got involved again because I knew I needed the camaraderie of those fellow architects. So that was more the reason I did more than
Hmm.
leadership at the time. So it wasn't really leadership until, the whole cycle starts. Somebody asks you to do something or whatever. And I kind of very quickly learned that through the AIA, when I had been in England, I had realized that I felt that architects were treated a little bit differently than they were in Southwest Florida. And I had made it my life mission by that point to like fix that disparity. And so I had realized that AIA would be a great platform to use to reach out to the public. And so the more I volunteered, the higher I went up in my local unstaffed chapter. And it was better and better. And I got to be involved on the Economic Council and, just get invited to things around the area in Southwest Florida. And I realized that was a great way for me to work and volunteer within the AIA. So it was great. It just gave me a bigger platform that I could use to reach out to the public and to the members and talk about value.
So leadership doesn't usually happen in one giant leap, it's a series of steps. What was one of those early leadership moments where you learned something that has stayed with you throughout your career?
Long before architecture, I did work in my family's Dairy Queen as a teenager. Or that experience taught me about business. It taught me about people, skills, and how to manage a team. And it was just so much more than selling dilly bars and making ice cream cones. Okay. It was just so much more because by the age of 15, I was managing women that were 3 times my age. And the worst part was managing teenage girls that were 2 and 3 years older than me. And so I hated that part. I hated the fact that I knew the business well enough that my parents put me in that position. And so even though I hated it, I think I hated it more when my mother would say to me, "You'll thank me someday for giving you this opportunity." And guess what? My mother was
Guess
right.
what?
I learned from that experience, and she was right because I was the younger one in the room. I had to learn to treat people with respect and then how
Mhm.
to create a consensus and how to train people without being a jerk. Okay. Or else I think I'm not a jerk. Okay. Maybe, but I think I learned that when I was very young. And I think those are very, very valuable skills that I have carried with me throughout my life. I think those people skills have translated very well into my architectural career, especially early on when I realized that, being right about something was not really the same as, like say you're designing something. So, you have the right answer for that design. So it wasn't so much about having the right answer. It was more about bringing everybody else along with you when you're trying to design something. And so I felt very fortunate that I had those skills already. I knew how to bring people with me. And I think leading people, it takes more patience than it takes to actually just run a project. And
Mhm.
that's been one of my early gifts from working in the Dairy Queen.
Yeah. So I cannot pass over this opportunity. My husband would be so disappointed, but I have to share that my husband, his family also owned a Dairy Queen when he was growing up.
Such a
Connection
unique
there.
coincidence, okay? So I that's not to
Exactly.
say, okay, that the Dairy Queen was producing architects, okay? Just because there's two of
No,
us and probably the only two of us in the country, right?
exactly. Yeah, just
But my
two.
parents would be very proud today, okay, to hear that, and they would be, and they'd be very happy that I am like relating my youth, and my
Yeah.
upbringing into this amazing opportunity that I'm going to have in the next couple years.
Are your parents still with you? Do they get to share in this? Do they get to be
No,
proud?
no, they passed away. Both have now passed away. I was very fortunate when I was AIA Florida president. My I was told that our convention would be in Naples, Florida. And I was so disappointed because I was like, no, I want to go somewhere else. I want to go to the Breakers or I want to go to Tampa. And I was told, no, we're going to have it in Naples. And so I was like, okay. But that also gave me the opportunity to have my parents with me at my
There
convention.
you go.
And it was the best thing. I mean, because they never knew what I did. My mother was over the moon. I mean, I said to her, I brought them to the reception, and then we went to the gala afterwards. And I said to her, when you're done, my son was with me. He will take you, and you're going to be put in a limousine, and you're going to be taken home. Whenever you feel tired, because she was getting older. She sat there the whole time and just grinned the whole time. And then she said afterwards, we have our little champagne toast. I'm ready
Yeah.
for my champagne, honey. So I was like, good on you. Good on you. And it was just really nice for me to see them really experience my leadership within the AIA because they had never really had that opportunity before. So that was great.
There's something really special about seeing a Florida architect step onto the national stage like this. What has Florida meant to your career and your leadership journey? You've kind of touched on that somewhat.
Some of you may or may not know my story. I lived in a couple places before I got my license. And then as soon as I got my license, I did move right back to England. It was a great run. Okay, I had my own business there. I immediately got licensed in England as well. And so I was able to shortly afterwards start my own business with another female architect. That was amazing. It was an amazing ride, that whole experience of having in practice in such a cosmopolitan city, because the work that we did was incredible and our clients were amazing. I mean, we had clients like Vivienne Westwood and Alexander McQueen and the soon-to-be Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And so those opportunities don't just happen by accident. It was like a series of good fortune and doing good work and getting the right press and meeting the right people. And so we were very lucky on that journey. And so that was a part of my life, which was great. And I got to learn about design and how to deal with historic buildings and all of that. But to answer your question, I think about Florida, it was when I came back to Florida to work, my timing was, I didn't think was great, but as always, timing is everything. It was perfect. I had been hired by a company I'd worked for before, and I was asked to be their senior designer. So I was doing all these great high-end, nice developer projects that had money and they were beautiful opportunities to design. But a hurricane came. It was Hurricane Charlie in 2004. Really devastated like the islands near me. And so instead of getting to do nice, beautiful projects, instead, the whole crew of us, okay, everyone we knew, everyone was brought out of retirement, everyone down here was sent out to the islands to assess buildings and to get them ready for renovating these buildings after the storm. And it couldn't have been a better opportunity to learn about this climate, because these buildings had been built in the 70s and the 80s and they had started to rot and they had been renovated. And then little did everybody know that you don't put vinyl siding on down here because it's going to rot underneath even more what was already rotting. And so there was this great opportunity to see and understand what it was in Florida. So that was a wake-up call to me. And so Florida to me, when I started my own practice, I had a lot of that experience under my belt. And
Mhm.
so Florida is really where I learned to practice with purpose, because
Mhm.
practicing on the west coast of Florida, it taught me firsthand what proactive, resilient design means. Okay. It's not just something we talk about. It's not like aspirational. We need to meet these energy calcs. It's real. And you have to be able to design and understand your climate to build here. It's just a professional obligation to do that. And so, as many of you know my story, I had been doing that for a while. And when Hurricane Ian hit, those buildings that I had designed, they were still standing. And that drew a lot of attention to my firm, because it was like, what is she doing? And it wasn't just locally, it was state level. Even architects
Mhm.
around the state weren't doing what I was doing. And then around, the country as well. So we got a lot of notoriety for that. And so I think that Florida experience and that ability to practice with purpose, it shaped so much of what I do today, and I'm very excited to bring that into the national conversation about resiliency. I mean, it's perfect timing for me and the AIA,
Mhm.
because I've done that work. I have that under
Yep.
my belt, and now I'm moving into the AIA. And if any of you have been listening to Ilya, our current president, he has a clear focus on regenerative and resilient design, and he is promoting programs that address environmental and societal changes. And here I'm coming in, I'll be coming in behind him, because they'll between us. And so, like, Florida's been the proving ground for all the things that Ilya's been talking about, and things that, the AIA has really jumped on board with all of this. So
Mhm.
I feel that in Florida, it's our climate, our growth, our hurricane vulnerability. They've taught us very hard lessons. I think what we, Florida, have learned in the past couple decades is something we can share with the rest of the country. And so having someone in leadership national leadership from Florida, it means I think that our experience in Florida can really shape that conversation, that's already underway and how it can move forward. I think we will get to play a big part in what will happen in the next couple of years.
Stepping into that role, what excites you the most?
Talking about the campaign, okay, like I think that's this answer to this question. So it was a crowded field. I was campaigning again. So very early on, I made a decision not to pay attention to the other candidates. I didn't want to know. I didn't look at their social media. I didn't look at their websites. I didn't other than being polite, knowing their personal stories when we met. I didn't want to know what they were running for. I just kind of felt like I knew what I stood for and I knew what I could bring. And I felt that was for me better, healthier, to not worry about what they were doing. And so I decided that I wanted to stay focused on my mission. And I decided very early on that my mission had been communicating the value of architects to the public. And that was something I had decided when I came back from England. And that's how I ran for president of AIA Florida. And so when I was thinking about what am I doing? I've made this decision to run. And what is my mission? And I'm Joyce. Why would your mission change? Like, why would anything change? So I stayed right on point. I just kept talking about the things that I talked about. And I think that I was clear from the first speech I had to give at our leadership summit right through my formal speech that I had to give for the campaign. And then, through all the calls and presentations that we were asked to give, I never wavered from what I was doing. Like all the other candidates could say what they wanted, but I knew what I was going to say and what I believed in. And I think that whole value proposition really resonated with members. Well, I think it did because they elected me. So I think that worked.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I
Absolutely.
think to answer your question, what am I most excited about? I think it's I want to have offered during my candidacy the possibility of giving every member, regardless of firm size or where they're from or age or gender or whatever, the language and the tools to communicate the value that architects will bring. And so that is still the work I am most excited about. I've already been in touch with AI National and I have explained to them, like, this is what I'm thinking. May I meet the right people? May I get started? This week, I'm going to meet the head of the communications team. So that's great news. So very
So
good.
you're already getting started.
I am. I'm afraid whether they like it or not. Okay. I don't know if I was supposed to do that, but it was kind of a calm after the storm, and I thought, no, this is too quiet. I know from being AI Florida president, you've got to think ahead. I wanted AI National to know what I was thinking so that, we could just be working towards the same goal. And I've already spoken to Ilya and I've spoken to Giselle about what she's doing to make sure what I'm doing is going to fit nicely with what she's doing. So, yeah, we've already started those conversations and I'm excited about that.
There you go. That's why it was time for you to be president.
Oh, thank you. That's
Yeah.
very sweet of you.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
the profession is changing quickly, as I know you're well aware, from technology, AI, climate, economics, workforce. Which of these issues do you think will have the greatest impact over the next several years?
I think that all of these things are connected, but whether the profession is able to communicate its value clearly enough to be invited and to stay at the table of conversations with builders and developers and elected officials. Without that, I think the other ones are going to become less important because I know that AI will change how we work. It's already changing how we work, and climate will change how we design. It's certainly changed the way we design in Florida. But if the architects can't articulate who they are and what they do, none of the rest matters. It's all intertwined, right? And the whole PACE strategic plan, I have mentioned this before many times. I am so grateful for what our members have done, how they have put together the strategic plan going forward for the next 5 years. And I am honored that I'm going to be the one that gets to implement it. I don't know if you're familiar, but the PACE strategic plan is practice, advocacy, climate equity. Those words and their definitions give us a framework to work within. And so I find working within rules is very beneficial because I'm always one to ask questions about rules and to break them when I need to. But I love having rules around me so that I can question them because rules can be a really good thing, but I'm always willing to go outside of them. If we want to talk about that PACE strategic plan in more depth, how I see it, it's concise and it's clear, right? Practice equips firms of every size to protect and profitability and navigate AI. Fantastic. What else do we want to hear? Money and dealing with your technology. If the AI can do that, fabulous. Advocacy. That advocacy I always think it's twofold. A lot of people think of advocacy as legislative advocacy, which is incredibly important. But to me, it's all about how do you make architects visible in the community? So it's that sort of twofold. And then climate, I think it's going to move us towards a real place-based, resilient approach in all of the regions around the US that we're all going to have to learn. And that once we are learning that, because in Florida, sure, we have hurricanes, but in the West, they have fires, and in the Southwest, they have drought. And so once we learn our vocabulary and we begin to talk to the public about place-based resiliency, I think it's going to be amazing that hearing all these architects talk about what we're doing, because we're not just the leaders of AIA, we're all the people, all the members of AIA. Even if 50% of them started talking about what they did, telling their stories, I think it would be a great way to educate the public. Equity. I mean, our profession should be for everyone. And I think the AIA has been working very hard to create pathways to firm ownership and equitable practice. And I think that's great. I think we need to keep pushing on that. I think they've got a great, I don't think we need to harp on it anymore. I think it's in place. And so I think it just needs to just keep going through. And, we've seen so many changes in leadership, the minorities that are coming forward and finding that AIA leadership you have a great opportunity to learn those skills, leadership skills. And I've built my own minority firm twice, okay, in two countries. So I am very well placed to advise and to help on how that can be done. Like I said, I think a lot of it's good and in place now. I think the AIA has gotten a handle on that already. And so I think it's going to be, sort of shepherding it and keeping it moving forward.
So we've talked about titles and accomplishments, but there's the person behind it. So who has been in your corner throughout this journey with you?
Well, first my family, of course. Okay.
Mhm.
I grew up with four brothers and parents who oddly expected the same thing, if not more, from their one daughter, than their boys. And so I think that taught me to be able to compete and to be able to lead, without apology, to be confident in what I was doing. So I will have to thank them first, but I would be remiss not to take the opportunity on the Voice of Florida podcast to say how important it's been, my colleagues across Florida, and how AIA Florida has been in my corner every step of the way. From the time I was the president of an unstaffed staff chapter in Southwest Florida to becoming AIA Florida, to my time at National when I was on the Strategic Council, AI Florida has always been in my corner. So I just want to reiterate that I don't feel that my win of becoming our national president is about me. I mean, my win definitely belongs to AIA Florida because that campaign was harder than I could have ever anticipated, but no other candidate had what I had. They did not have the support that I had. I had calls and letters and videos and written endorsements and just that confidence in me from the very start that I was the one. And I maybe I wouldn't even have got that far without Florida but they were right there with me. So maybe it was my decision to run, but I would say without Florida, I wouldn't be where I am today without Florida. So
So,
thank you,
Joyce,
Florida, all of you, because you are my rock, and I love that. I'm very proud of that.
so this has been a wonderful opportunity to celebrate you and this milestone. Is there anything else you'd like to share before you head out on this grand adventure?
Yeah, I feel so fortunate that like I am in this position. This is the profession that I love. And the fact that I get to represent architects around the country, the fact that I get to carry on what Ilya has started and what Giselle and I have had discussions about now. And then on top of that, I get to travel the world and be an advocate for this crazy profession it is incomprehensible to me. And yet I was terrified at the beginning, and the further I come into it, I'm in it like 3 months now, maybe almost. And I'm so honored and I'm so excited and I'm so thrilled to have this opportunity for sure.
As you move forward, I hope that you know you have all the pride and support of the entire AIA Florida community as you assume this next leadership role. And I can't wait for the rest of the country and those you'll serve around the world to get to know what an incredible leader you are.
Oh, that's very sweet of you.
Thank you for being here and for sharing your incredible story.
I am very honored to be here. Thank you.
So join us as we continue these conversations, celebrating the legacy that connects us and the future we're shaping together. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with your colleagues. This is Rhonda Hammond, AIA, your host, and thank you for listening to this episode of The Voice of Florida Architecture, a podcast of AIA Florida.